All right. Well, good morning, dear ones. We are SOTU, and this is SOTUesday for the 18th day of October 2016. Last week we spoke to you about reflections of repression, and this week we would like to speak to you a bit about the reflections of your election. And if you were to look at the dynamic, you can clearly see, first of all, let us particularly say that each of these candidates are particularly representations of their generation. Donald Trump in the dynamics of the masculine and representation of the chauvinistic masculine, who is so used to being in the patriarchal position of power that political correctness is not necessarily an important issue. And the dynamics of Hillary and her Hillary Clinton and her reflections of the what shall we say, the enlightened, empowered feminine are clearly a representation of the generational dynamics of the prophet generation, of which both these people, and if you do not understand the prophet generation, please look it up in the fourth turning. But those in your world who were born between the years 1945 and 1965 are a part of this generation, sometimes called the baby boom generation, but certainly a dynamic of the prophet generation. And so, each of these candidates are clearly reflections of basically simply the dynamic of the battle of the sexes. And nothing gets either side more riled up than the dynamics that are being presented in your world. So you also, at the very same time that this whole dynamic of battle of the sexes is going out, being played out in the dynamics of the American reflection and also in the dynamics of the reflections of how it is being received in the rest of your world, you need to be able to step back from the dynamic and say, hey, in fact, you have two genders and in your earthly humanity, and that in and of itself is a part of the dynamic of duality, because you are beings that were created and have lived many, many lifetimes and many, many experiences in the human experience. We are speaking of strictly this time just the earthly human experience, as many of you have chosen to reincarnate again and again in this paradigm, have achieved the dynamic of movement, have achieved the dynamic of empowerment. The masculine and the enlightened masculine in its own way has been able to transcend the dynamics of the patriarchy and come to a more balanced and a more, what shall we say, enlightened stance, as has the some in the feminine. But we would suggest to you that if you are locked in your dynamic of feminism, like the masculine used to be locked into the dynamic of the chauvinism, then you are just presenting a different side of the coin, and you are just happening to win the battle of the sexes now. And so the dynamics of energy changes, but in fact what you have here is a dynamic of a duality. And in the dynamic of the paradox of the masculine and the feminine, in fact, there are truth and lies in both positions. And when those dynamics of the truth and when those dynamics of the lies in both positions are presented and are understood and are risen above, where one can see the truth of the real situation rather than the paradox. In other words, the view from one end of the paradox or the other end of the paradox. And this can be transcended, this can be done beyond the dynamic of gender. And it is we would say, a tendency, a desire that is happening in your world right now, as so many are being involved in the dynamics of gender identity and what their gender is and whom they wish to be identified as, and the androgynousness that humanity seems to be growing toward. So many of the dynamics in your world are ones that have been exacerbated by the whole divide and conquer routine, and so many of you have been a victim of that in this dynamic of the split around the masculine. Now, we're not telling you who to vote for, because in our perspective, there are positives and negatives in both dynamics, and we realize that we may outrage some of you feminists by being able to say that, but we would also suggest that your outrage in this area is indicative of your prejudice, is indicative of your bias. So it's time to be able to even question your own dynamics. Now, the masculine is clearly questioning its own dynamics. It is being shamed. It is being understood as being, what shall we say, petty, and the reflections of the election are one of chaos, because there are no answers here for you, dear one. There are no answers here for you other than the dynamic of personal empowerment. You are not going to find your answers in the dynamic of the paradigm as it exists right now. You are not going to find the answers that you seek until you realize that in your world now, in this new technological age, and moving forward as you do, there are simply not going to be enough jobs for everyone. So the question ultimately, now, there is more than enough wealth for each of you to have at least a minimum level of food, water, shelter, healthcare, education. Certainly so. Certainly so. And if you had that, then what kind of world could you possibly create? A world with enough for all? Now, there's a concept, isn't it? But again, it's going to take a major restructuring. So for years we've been asking you, what's it going to take to motivate you? Is it going to take really a reset? Well, if that's what it takes, then that's what it's going to take. And so in order to help you get through this dynamic, and perhaps even get through the next week or so, we would like to teach you the dread technique, if we have not already done that. And dread is a dynamic of the fear of an upcoming, well, we used to use the example of an upcoming interview, but we could say to you that it's the fear of the upcoming election. And so we would suggest to you that perhaps when you're out walking, perhaps when you are out riding in your car, you have to understand this dread that you're feeling is a dynamic of repressed fear. So we would suggest to you that one of the best ways to vent, best ways to get rid of that dynamic of fear, is to actually amp it up, is actually do the opposite of what your normal reaction is, which is to run from the fear. And we would suggest to you that the best thing for you to do is to face it, to amp it up, and to feel that fear as much as possible. Now, we're not saying to do it for any super length of time, but you might choose to do it if you're in the car driving to work. Perhaps you can do it for maybe the next block, and hope you don't get caught in traffic until you get to the next light. And what you do is you just amp it up. You find out where it is in your body, and you feel it. You squeeze it up and let yourself feel the face, make the face, and do all the dynamics and allow yourself to amp up the fear, and amp up the fear, and amp up the fear. And pretty soon you'll find yourself popping up the other side, feeling quite a bit more relaxed and quite a bit more objective. So that is our gift to you for the day, for the week. It is the dread technique. You can do it for 15 or 20 steps, 30 steps, 40 steps. You can do it while riding your bicycle. You can do it while exercising. You can do it while sitting on the toilet. We love you, dear ones. We love you so much. And so until the next time, we are So Too. And this is SOTUesday for the 18th day of October, 2016. And so until the next time we close, sending you peace, sending you happiness, sending you joy. We do love you all so much.